We've got a great guest for you guys today. Mikey Weinstein is a former Air Force officer, White House legal counsel in the Reagan Administration. More recently, in 2006, he founded the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring that members of the United States Armed Forces receive their constitutional guarantee of religious freedom. You might have seen him in a recent brawl with Bill O'Reilly, a verbal brawl. Okay, and he's got two books in 2006 with God on Our Side, One Man's War Against an Evangelical Coup in America's Military. And in 2012, his latest book was No Snowflake in an Avalanche, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, its battle to defend the Constitution and one family's courageous war against religious extremism in high places. Mikey, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Cenk. Thank you.
All right, what'd you do to poor O'Reilly to get him all pissed off?
I don't think it takes very much. I'd like to say he made a pass at me, and then I was going to file a sexual harassment suit, but then they were going to pay me a big settlement. But we don't need to go there. So apparently, I brought.
I don't think you're his type, but
no, I hope not. He, in a recent interview involving a matter at Guantanamo Bay that happened during the holiday season, involving a couple of unconstitutionally placed nativity scenes that we were able to get removed to the chapel, which is where they need to be, and they can actually be seen by more people. He, I guess, held me responsible for that horrible part of the war on Christmas, and then in the process called our clients. In that case, we had 18 members of the military. Some of them have received the Silver Star in combat. Some of them are special ops folks. 11 of the 18 happen to be Christians, I might add. 11 or 12, I forget the exact number now. But he called them cowards because they wouldn't show their faces and come on his show, you know, the O'Reilly show. At that point, I simply reminded him that, I think he ran off to the University of London during Vietnam. Whatever it was, I think he was, I made it clear that at least our clients were serving. I said, don't call our clients cowards. He got very upset, and then he held up his pen, never done better than was done with you guys on your parody, and said that he had covered 4 wars with his pen, and I pretty much lost it. And I think he promised he would give me the last 20 seconds, and then he broke the promise and screamed, cut off that weasel and bloviator's microphone, so they weren't able to hear me say what I was thinking, what he really was. And
so to give us what Fox News wouldn't allow you to say.
Fuck you, Bill O'Reilly. You're a
that's clear.
You're a coward. You're a I forget whatever else was going through my mind, but he was absolutely in every possible way a it's evil when you say the things he said about our members of the military, and don't sit there and tell me. I mean, at least, he's no Ernie Pyle. I mean, Al Gore was under fire in Vietnam. Don't go and say that you covered wars. When you were sitting in your bathtub, with a mint julep, smoking a cigar, watching the feed coming in from some TV show or listening to the radio. That was opprobrious. It was disgusting. It was Bill O'Reilly. So I don't think he's going to have me back on again.
Yeah. No, Mike, you did the country a little bit of a service there because you really exposed them. I mean, that was a moment where I think even his hardcore audience who's bought into his propaganda and all that thought, what do you mean you covered 4 wars with a pen? What does that mean? Yeah. That means you sat in your studio. I mean, because he loves to say anybody, like if you were against the Iraq war, he'd say, oh, you denigrated our troops and stuff. Right. No, you just denigrated our troops.
Correct.
And you called them cowards.
Correct.
And we heard it with our own ears.
Right.
So I think you did even some of his audience a favor by pointing out what Bill O'Reilly really is. Okay. And every name he called you, bloviator, etc., is of course what he thinks of himself.
Well, even the weasel part, and I mean, the bottom line is, I hadn't wanted to do his show for many years prior to that because he controls, it's taped, he controls what's going to be on. But to call our brave members of the military serving in a place like that, and cowards was beyond the pale. To be topped only by the absurdity and further, weapons grade cowardice of saying that you covered wars with your pen, which is very much like saying that I can see Russia from my home, or that I'm an astronaut because I watched it happen on TV. I've been on 17 space shuttle missions. I've been every time I've sat there, with my bottle of Coors or my Heineken, and I've had my stogie. I'm just watching the NASA feed, so therefore I'm an astronaut, and it's ridiculous.
And I think what it really showed is that they never really cared about the troops. They just use them as a prop for whatever their political agenda is. So they want to go to war with Iraq, and they don't really care what happens to their troops, obviously, in that incredibly foolish war, etc. So now, look, your whole family's in the armed forces. Your 2 sons, daughter-in-law, son-in-law are Air Force Academy graduates. You're an Air Force Academy graduate from '77. So you guys are military guys. What made you go in this direction in the first place about protecting religious freedom within the military?
Well, I think as we were discussing before the show, there's an old saying that we often find our destiny on the roads we took to avoid it. My wife and I and our kids have spent 11 and a half years in D.C., spent a little over 3 of those in the West Wing of the Reagan White House, which was very interesting. And we decided, and I'd been General Counsel to H. Ross Perot and Perot Systems Corporation, so I knew that there was a book somewhere, having been a lawyer, Assistant General Counsel in the White House and having been General Counsel for Perot. And then we decided, let's move back to Albuquerque, which is where I'm from, and we wanted some peace and quiet. So we did some regular private sector stuff, and then everything changed on or about February 4th. 2004, just almost a decade ago, when Mel Gibson came out with his pleasant movie, The Passion of the Christ, or as I refer to it, the Jesus Chainsaw Massacre, or Freddy versus Jesus. At the time, I had 3 of my kids at the academy, my Christian future daughter-in-law and my 2 Jewish sons, and I was literally astounded by the pressure being put on the 4,400 cadets there and the roughly 5,500, 6,000 staff, faculty and staff to go see this movie. I saw the movie, I was pretty shocked when I saw it, and even halfway through, I stood up and said, screamed, "I'll accept Christ, stop beating the poor guy," right? But it wasn't a joking matter when I saw what was happening at the academy. At first, I thought that this was just somebody going a little too far. For about 9 months, I worked with the academy to see what was happening, and then I suddenly realized that Houston, we do not have a problem, issue, or challenge. We have a national security threat. So we're not born with theme songs. Like you go to see a movie, there's going to be theme music, the trumpets, the chorus, the drums that tell you when something's going to happen. In our real life, sometimes we have to listen very hard to our own minds, our hearts, to see when something significant has happened. And my wife and I decided we tried working with other organizations, the ACLU, among them many others, and they're all great organizations, but the military is so peculiarly hyper-tribal, adversarial, communal, and ritualistic. It was almost like our family had we have 3 generations of military academy graduates. My nephews had 4 or 5 tours as a fighting U.S. Marine in Iraq and Afghanistan. We go way back, and like we were almost born to do this. I don't really believe in destiny, and we realized that maybe we needed to actually form something. They don't teach you how to form civil rights organizations pretty much at any college, certainly not the Air Force Academy. My dad went to Annapolis, and we slowly but surely got to the point when we realized that we were being inundated by hundreds and then thousands of members of the military. Currently, over 36,000 members of the U.S. military are clients of ours at every rank, and 96% of them are practicing Protestants and Roman Catholics being oppressed and tortured because they are not Christian enough. And it's when you mix that in with our weapons of mass destruction and our drones, the nukes, the laser-guided conventional weapons, it is absolutely every bit as much to be described correctly as an internal national security threat in breadth, width, and magnitude, Cenk, that we're facing, the same that we're facing externally by a resurgent Taliban and Al-Qaeda, but it's in our own country.
So why do you call it a national security threat?
Because they have I'll say it in one sentence. What we're dealing with is a fanatical religiosity, and not Salafi or Wahhabist Islam, but what's known as Dominion or fundamentalist Christianity, mixed in with actual weapons of mass destruction, which we have, the other side doesn't yet, mixed in with a torturous, poisonous version of so-called patriotism, further mixed in with a completely unfettered access to our weapon systems because of the very draconian nature of military command influence. Your military superior is not your shift manager at Taco Bell or Starbucks. It's very different. Further mixed in with a total dearth of any restraint, oversight, or supervision, and what you have is a metastasizing national security threat that is so enormous that you almost can't believe it exists unless you're complicit. And we fight this. Eisenhower warned the world about, in his farewell speech, right, about the military-industrial complex. What we're fighting here at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and you saw part of it in that great piece that you guys did on the based on the O'Reilly thing, is a fundamentalist Christian, parachurch, military, corporate, congressional proselytizing complex. It's enormous.
So I want to get the breadth of it, because some of the stuff I found out actually through your group many years ago. You exposed some of that at the Air Force, and I had not known the depth of it until you guys pointed it out. And then I remember General William Boykin famously saying about Muslims, I knew that my God was bigger than theirs, right? And I thought, that's amazing. It's amazing that this is a general who is so fundamentalist and would say this when it's going to hurt our troops. If Muslims in Iraq, which we're theoretically liberating, think that we're not liberating them, but that we came to dominate them with our bigger God, we're going to have a mess on our hands, and more of our guys are going to get killed for no good reason, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I don't think I still quite understand how big it is. But and let's not. I mean, is it 10%? Is it? I know the percentages, of course, are super rough. Is it 30%? What percent? And are the different branches totally, different in that sense? Is the Air Force more Dominionist? And the more you dive into it, I know this is an incredibly long question, but
no, it's fine.
The more you dive into it, the more people who don't know about it are amazed by what Dominionists actually think and how prevalent they are. Because when I say it on the show, oftentimes the reaction I get is, "Oh, you're exaggerating."
No,
they couldn't possibly believe that, right?
Right.
So tell me about the breadth of it in your experience, and what they actually believe.
What I'm going to try to do is to answer the question first before I give you. We have numbers as best as we can get them. You have to remember that Hitler had only 7.9% roughly in his National Socialist movement at its zenith, and look what he did. Stalin had 2.8, 2.9% in his movement. The Dominionist movement in the U.S. military, our best estimate is somewhere between 28 and 34%. Now, when I say
Jesus.
that,
wait. Where do you get those numbers? Because that's a giant number.
These are numbers that we've, it's been a tenth of a century we've been in this business. If you ask an orthopedic surgeon, how many ways does an arm break? It's the law of big numbers. We see it constantly over and over. We have people talking to us every hour of every day. I mean, I'm getting emails and texts right now because I've got both my phones on vibrate. It just never stops. The law of big numbers. The chaplaincy, we believe, according to our chaplain clients that are in there, it's about 84% evangelical, and about a third of those are Dominionists. The difference, by the way, one of our biggest growth areas are evangelical members of the Christian faith. They are on our staff, our advisory board. They donate to us. They're clients. They're fine. The difference is every fundamentalist, or its synonym, Dominionist, is an evangelical by necessity, but not vice versa. When you cross the time, place, and manner line for proselytizing as an evangelical, that's when you become a Dominionist. You really can't scream Jesus in a crowded theater. The rest of the time we will support you. You have to also remember that when you graduate as a second lieutenant from one of the academies, or an ensign in the Navy at Annapolis, or from ROTC, or from Officers Candidate School, Officer Training School, the day that you graduate, you roughly outrank 85 to 90% of the rest of the military because of the rank structure. So it's literally enormous. Two of our biggest stories were terrifying. One feeds right into something that you said. You probably have heard of them. The first one that went viral for us was the Jesus Rifle story, when we had 136 United States Marines from Iraq and Afghanistan, mostly Afghanistan, come to us because it turned out the scopes on all of our rifles were embedded in the metal base were biblical quotations from the book of, I think it was Mark, John, Matthew, and Revelations, just right in there, because it came from a company like, think Chick-fil-A, but a defense contractor, called Trigicon in Michigan, and they had put those in there. You can imagine when we had a Marine, force recon guy, these are the toughest Marines, say they're going into a Ville, and 90% of Afghanistan is illiterate per se, but you have the village elders coming out saying, "Can we see your Jesus rifle?" And why is that there? The symbology, and each of the quotations had something to do with the scope that was made to go on the rifles. It took 36 to 48 hours before Petraeus, at the time was the leader there, said, we got to stop this. The Church of England came out to support us. It turned out all of our NATO allies had the same rifles, so did the Israeli Defense Forces.
That's ironic.
And then we've had many stories go viral. The one that terrified me the most, because I think this is what you're asking, and for your audience that doesn't think that this is, it's not that I don't care about the HIV crisis in sub-Saharan Africa or the whales or global warming. I do, but if we lose this fight, the people we're fighting want to use our nukes to blow the world up, because that'll serve as an accelerant or lubricant to bring their weapons-grade version of Jesus back. And they're basically promised a 200-mile-long river. Here's a graphic for you, 4.5 feet deep, filled with nothing but the human blood of those that their version of Jesus is slaughtered at the Battle of Armageddon. And they'll put on that happy fundamentalist face saying, therefore, my Christian brothers and sisters, rejoice, for the worst is yet to come. But we had the Jesus nuke story that broke, I think it was 2011. 68 United States Air Force nuclear missile launch officers, like the 34 or 38 last week that got caught cheating on those tests that made all the news, came to us, 62 of them practicing Roman Catholics or Protestants, because they were tired of being indoctrinated in a training session that basically used St. Augustine's just war theory, indicating that it was called Jesus wants you to use your nuclear weapons. We couldn't believe it. We were able, through one of our clients, to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was being used. Unbelievable. It's on our website, militaryreligiousfreedom.org, and there are big pictures of Jesus on a white horse quoting Revelation 19:11, the book of Timothy, the book of Hebrews. The final endorser of this program was a decorated Nazi SS war hero by the name of Werner von Braun, who said, we brought our rocket technology to America at the end of World War II. Remember, he used a lot of Jewish slave labor in his underground rocket laboratories because we wanted to bring it to a Bible-based society. The military cut the training in about, I think it was 48 hours, and that's important for us. And they admitted they'd been doing it for 15 or 20 years. They've been going on for 25 years. It also included faces of the dead from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We broke the story right before the anniversary of those bombings, and that didn't go over too well with the Japanese. So, you just can't, I can go on and on.
So I know the Germans had Gott mit uns on their belts.
Yes, God with us.
God is with us.
Right.
So I want to understand that story you just explained a little bit better. Who's doing the teaching, and what exactly are they teaching? Like, what I mean by that is, are they saying to these folks, well, look, we're the military and we kill people, and don't worry, Jesus is with us? Or are they saying, when it comes time, we're going to ask you to do a bigger level of killing? Like, what are they driving?
It is clearly the latter and not the former, which is the reason why the Air Force, whenever we catch them, and I want to get back to the fact that when I try to explain to people how bad it is, and ask me the question, Mike, how bad is it? I'm going to use your pen to illustrate that. I won't even actually draw anything. I'm just going to drop it, and you'll see what I'm saying. It is pretty much uniform throughout the military services. It is worse at the point of the spear. The closer we get to drawing blood, you see more Dominionism. The Navy SEALs, the Air Force PJs, the Green Berets, the Rangers. Boykin and Boykin would go around the country when he was selling his book, referring to me as demonic and satanic. I think it was Jerry Falwell that referred to me as the field general of the godless armies of Satan. We have another group it's a fundamentalist Christian church that is praying for all the women in my foundation and my family to develop fast-moving, inoperable, metastasizing breast cancer. We have another group going for all the men in my family to get rectal cancer. You can't imagine, they'll call my wife up and say they're going to blow my head off, capture my blood in the bathtub, and then drown her in that. It never stops. That's why I'm saying so we live with a lot of security. I have security here with me today. But we're just it's the nature of this business. What I wanted to say is that this is not a job. You have to inhabit this. You have to inhabit this role of the nicest thing that was ever said to us. We had a young Navajo sailor on a large aircraft carrier, and when this piece goes out that we're doing, it's going to be going, like I said, going to places that have never seen the Young Turks before. You'd be surprised. But he's a Native American spiritualist from a place called Window Rock, Arizona, which is the capital of the Navajo Nation. We were able to stop this chief petty officer from terrorizing him, who was a fundamentalist Christian. And then the sailor brought he got a message to his family in Window Rock, and they sent it to us saying, please thank Mikey and the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, here are the key words: for being the voice we're not allowed to speak with. Just a few words, 5 or 6 words, but I think about it all the time. And the danger here is that the people we're fighting have a playbook. It's their version of the New Testament. And they'll look at, for instance, Luke 19:27. I remember that because I'm a baseball fan. That was a great year for the Yankees. And it's called the parable of the pounds. Jesus often spoke in parables. And in the parable of the pounds, Jesus says, go out among the people and bring back before me, Jesus, all those that will not accept me, Jesus, as king over them, and then slaughter them before me. Now, that is not the interpretation. There are roughly, in case you didn't know, roughly about 41,000 distinctly different denominations of Christianity. In mainline Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, that is not how they view Luke 19:27. But in Dominionism, that is how they view it.
So what do you think is the worst they can do? I mean, so you're painting a picture here of the Dominionist in literally apocalyptic terms.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, the way you're saying it, it almost sounds like, I don't want to use the word coup because it wouldn't necessarily be against us, but in the middle of a conflict, do they go rogue and launch nukes? Is that possible? That seems...
Let me give you an example. There's an organization, when I say there's somewhere between 2.5, 3 dozen parachurch organizations that run rampant through the military. Mm-hmm. They are so inextricably intertwined with our Defense Department that they're like an alloy. One, for example, is the Officers Christian Fellowship. And for the enlisted folks, it's called the Christian Military Fellowship. Until a few years ago, when we were pillorying them in the press, and when they cosmetically changed their purpose and goals, listen to their purpose. We want Christian officers exercising biblical leadership to raise up a godly military. Their goals. We want to see a spiritually transformed United States military with ambassadors for Christ in uniform. Now, parenthetically, that hasn't worked out too well for planet Earth the last 2,000 years. Thirdly, empowered by the Holy Spirit. Their chief Bible study that they push mercilessly on their helpless subordinates is, quote, we will not allow the opposition, all of which is spearheaded by Satan, to thwart us in our attempt to regain territory for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the U.S. military. If I changed some nouns so that it was the Quran and it was the Mahdi warriors, there would be blood in the streets. You know, look, I spent over 3 years in the Reagan White House. I was a Texas billionaire and 2-time presidential candidate as General Counsel. I'm a highly flawed guy, but I'm the guy doing this. Mm-hmm. And we see it every single day. When you tell someone that they lack integrity, character, trustworthiness, intelligence, honor, honorability because of their chosen religious faith or lack thereof, there is no difference, Cenk, between that and telling someone that they're stupid because of the color of their skin or because they were born a woman. But it's extremely difficult to stand up to a military superior if you're being pressured or you're the subject of bigotry because of your religious faith. Remember, most of our clients are Christians because you almost immediately become a tarantula on a wedding cake and they don't last very long.
So what I can't understand is why we don't put an end to this nonsense. So if I'm whoever, like Bush, he was evangelical. Was he a Dominionist? I don't know. From time to time, he would talk about Gog and Magog coming out of Iraq, and he literally told the French leader that before the Iraq War, and that's insanity. And so you wonder if he was at least had a foot in that house. But if I'm Barack Obama, if I was George H.W. Bush, if I was Bill Clinton, once I find out the severity of this, because this is not something you're making up. These are like we know that there was the Jesus Rifles. We know that there was that seminar that they did for a long time.
Oh, there are many other stories.
Right, and we know what General Boykin said. It's on tape.
Right.
So why don't they root it out and go, are you guys insane? That's not what we do. This is the United States of America. It says right there in the First Amendment that everybody's got enough freedom of religion. You can't put your religion on other people. You're doing the same thing as the Taliban are. Why don't they put an end to it?
It's a great question. It's not just the separation of church and state that exists in the First Amendment, and that wasn't. Remember, the Bill of Rights wasn't passed until March of 1791, 15 months after the body of the Constitution was passed, which includes Clause 3, Article 6. We're both lawyers, but most lawyers aren't even aware of that. That says we will never have a religious test for any position in the federal government. we can't get to them or they're not paying attention. Our foundation hired a very well-known lobbyist for a year in Washington to try to help us in accordance with all the regulations to get attention on the Hill. And when finally the lobbyist came back and said, don't, fire me. I said, what do you mean? They said, Mikey, no one's going to touch this. They're terrified of losing evangelical Christian vote and money, votes and money. They're not going to touch it. So you would seem to think everyone is against gun violence, or are they? After what happened at Sandy Hook, look what's happened in this country in the last 2 weeks with just the shootings. Everyone's against sexual assault. But at the same time, it continues to exist significantly in the military. The military is a very xenophobic environment. It's very insular. Most people don't understand it. When I speak at colleges and universities all over the country, I'll ask someone to explain to me the difference between a general and a private, and they often cannot do it. They don't understand. And they're saying, well, this is obviously bad. No, to the people that we're fighting, they think we're the bad ones. That it's very much like the playground bully that after he beats some poor kid into the dirt, and the teaching monitor runs over and says, Billy, what have you done to this little boy here? He goes, look what that guy's head did to my knuckles here. Look, my knuckles are all bruised. But it's extraordinarily serious when you realize that the U.S. military, no kidding, is the technologically most lethal organization ever created by humankind. There's a reason that we have 4-star admirals and generals that are clients and supporters. In some cases, they'll contact me and have us intervene so that they don't have to take the heat for doing it. The Bill of Rights was passed not for the convenience of the majority, Cenk, but to protect the minority from the expected tyranny of the majority. And when you stand up to a military superior for your religious rights, what you often see is the tyranny of the majority morphing into the tantrum of the majority. And nobody can hurt you the way a military superior can. We've had 13 of our clients KIA downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan. The attack in Benghazi took out one of our most treasured advisory board members. Mike Farrell's on our advisory board. Mm-hmm. Well, so was Glenn Doherty, one of the 2 Navy SEALs killed in that attack. And Irish Catholic kid from Boston. When that happened, and I had spoken to him right before he went over there, and he was one of our best fundraisers. He was one of our best, he handled Camp Pendleton. He handled a big area for us, and we will never be able to fill the hole that that impacted us with his tragic death and the violence there. He took a bunch of them out before they hit him with an RPG. So I know that he went down as a warrior, but there's a reason that he was with us, because he saw it and he knew it was there. And as I mentioned, the closer you get to the actual violence of combat, the more dominionism you see. Oh, by the way, you asked a long question. Yeah. Is it uniform in the 4 branches of the military? The Marines are technically part of the Navy, but the best thing I could say is, and let me ask you a simple question, and your audience out there in TV land. I'm going to drop your pen, and what force made that drop?
Gravity.
How ubiquitous is gravity?
Everywhere.
This is how literally ubiquitous and systemic, out of control dominionism is, or fundamentalist Christianity, in the Department of Defense. And we have about 1,000 military installations scattered around the world in 150 countries. And as I said before, yes, I want to fight it in other civic organizations. That is not our lane. We're concerned about the people having the weapon systems. And so when I talk about the apocalyptic aspect, it's easy to say, oh, now Mikey, you're just doing this. It's a great gig for you. And you'd have to tell that to me and my family and our foundation staff. We're not playing the violins about what we have to go through. This is the nature of this business. As I said before, you have to inhabit. You can't pursue this unless you're prepared to inhabit it 24/7.
So it's interesting, because as much as I've covered on the show, I've never actually, I don't think, had a discussion with a real life dominionist, right? And
Yeah.
so when we talk about it, again, the reaction that we'll get back oftentimes is, guys, they don't actually believe that. Like, that's what people will say all the time.
I know.
Because they feel like no one could actually believe that. I mean, they don't really want almost everyone on the planet to die and Armageddon to come and only 440,000 people, or no, 144,000 people
Right.
to survive. That means nearly 7 billion people are going to die. I mean, what kind of Jesus is that anyway? They don't actually believe that, is what people will say. Do you think they actually believe it and want it to happen? Are you saying that 28 to 34% of our military can't wait for 7 billion people to die?
The simple answer is affirmative. Live and breathe it every day. We're doing this show, and there's only so much time, and I would ask your audience to go look at the text, audio, and video at militaryreligiousfreedom.org. We had a member of a high-ranking member of the U.S. military just very recently referred to your journalism, and this show's journalism, as not as advanced as I think it was something along the lines of sophomoric, not even worthy of a high school journalism class, because they knew I was coming on. Now, I don't even know how they knew that. We haven't tracked that down. I don't know if you guys had that out that I was going to be coming on. It was posted a few days ago. This individual and his followers are prototypical fundamentalist, dominionist Christians. They think that it's easy to attack me, my family, and the foundation in any way they possibly can, but they attacked you personally in the show knowing that I was coming on. And so let me make it very clear. Nobody wants to see people die, but hey, it's not art, it's in the book. If these are the people that if they see a leaf blow across their driveway, that was foretold, and it's in the book. You have to have to sit down and actually talk to a dominionist who's going to actually open up and say, yeah, this is the way it's going to be. It's not easy to do that. In the case of me and our staff and our clients, we don't have to worry about it. They come to us all the time. You know, the constant. If my last name was Smith and not Weinstein, and if I was a plumber like Joe, the plumber, and not a lawyer, I don't think we would see 98% of the filth that comes in. But no one is reminded more every day that I'm a filthy, stinking, Christ-killing, left-leaning, commie, atheist Jew than I am. Despite the fact that most of our staff of 160, which includes many volunteers, are the vast majority are Christians. 96% of our clients are Christians. Most of our donors are Christians. But Cenk, I'm telling you, I'm not going to say you need to get out more, because you get out far more than most. I mean, you just went 19 miles in the snow. This exists. It is terrifying. I changed my entire life. My family changed their lives. Our clients have changed their lives. And if I could just throw it away and say, I'm going to go out to Maui, I'm going to sit on the beach and and have a few drinks and just learn to surf, I couldn't live with myself. This is something that must be stopped.
Yeah, and from my take on it is that I think that, and maybe I'm being naive, but I still think that a majority of those guys don't think like, well, we want the 7 billion to die. Of course they don't want the 7 billion to die. They just think that's what's going to happen. And so we're trying to warn people, etc. What I'm worried about is the minority that think, wouldn't it be great if we could encourage that along? And they don't view it as like the 7 billion people dying. They view it as Jesus coming back. If we could just kind of push that process along, I think those are the scariest people on earth.
Well, let me correct it a little bit with you. The only people that we fight are dominionists. And to be a dominionist means that you're going to proselytize again in a time, place, or manner, just like, that violates the law, the Constitution, Department of Defense, directives, instructions, regulations. Just like if you want to protest at a soldier's funeral like the idiots at the Westboro Baptist Church, or you want to protest at an abortion clinic, you can do that in a time, place, and manner. If you violate the time, place, and manner stricture, we view you as a target of the foundation. And we try to move in seconds and minutes, not hours and days. And our clients will tell that to you. It is the people that we are fighting are convinced that we are in the very, very end of days. It's first and goal on the 1-inch yard line. Not the 1 yard line, the 1-inch yard line. Mm-hmm. It's first and goal. And they believe that we need to get Jewish hegemony in Israel, because that's ground zero. We got to do whatever we can to help Jesus along. And the nuclear weapons and the conflict has been preordained. We don't want people to die, but it was God and the other God, the Holy Spirit, and His Son Jesus, the Godhead. They've decreed this. And let's get Jesus needs our help. Whatever we can do to serve as an accelerant or lubricant to bring Him back here. Of course, it sounds insane. Remember, most of our clients are Christians. They're saying this is not the message as we interpret it from Christ. But my job is not to interpret Christ's messages. Whether I believe, I was born and raised Jewish. Right now, I believe that human beings know as much about the true nature of the universe and God as my attack-trained dogs know how my MasterCard works. I mean, that's what I think. Yeah, I love the bagels. I love not paying retail. I love Hanukkah. I still pray in Hebrew. I don't really buy into the theology, but that's not the point. The point is that those that do buy into it have command and control of weapons of mass destruction. Now, if you turn it around, the people that we are fighting, the Taliban, the Mujahideen, the Al-Qaeda, the insurrectionists, they do too. They have their playbook. They're crazy also. They're completely crazy. I mean, but if you ask the average American to explain the difference between a Shia and a Sunni, they can't do it. Ask the average member of Congress if they can do that. But well, so it is something that the reason I'm on this show is that it's likely that a large amounts of your audience may not be aware of this. But when we blast this out to members of the military, I'm hoping that others will become fans of TYT, and it's something that I think about all the time, and I can't help it.
Mikey, if you're at least 20% right, it's still incredibly dangerous, like world-changing dangerous.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So now you mentioned that you're Jewish, and you mentioned that you had some anti-Semitic comments against you. How about your family? I mean, I know you got into this because your kids were in the armed forces. Did they get anti-Semitic comments as well? Well,
what started the whole thing off for me was when my youngest son, who was then a dually or a fourth classman, a freshman at the Air Force Academy, right at the completion of his fourth class year, I was up at the Air Force Academy for a graduate leadership seminar where they had like 250 of their most respected graduates. I'm probably on the bottom of that list now. At the time, I was way up there because of some of the things that I've been able to do. He was attending at the academy, and he asked if he could come see me. I was going to see him anyway, but he told me he wanted to go off post to tell me something. This was that moment when the drums and the chorus and everything kicked in, the soundtrack. And that was about 3 or 4 months after the Mel Gibson movie had come out, and I thought we had solved this. He said, "Dad, I want you to know that I'm going to be getting into trouble here." And of course, I'm a father. I went, what does that mean? He said,
right.
I want you to tell Mom also. And I said, you mean you're not in trouble yet? He said, no, I'm going to be getting into trouble. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to beat the shit out of the next person that calls me a fucking Jew or accuses me or our family or our people of total complicity in the execution of Jesus Christ. It had happened in his cadet chain of command in numerous places, whether it was on the athletic fields, in his squadron, wherever it was. I don't remember much of what else happened. I went back and got a lot of alcohol in the hotel room, but that was kind of for us the shot heard around the world, because if you're a parent, and anybody that's watching the show that is, when your children suffer, you suffer, and that's the way it should be. So I needed to, I'm a passionate guy. My wife has always said that I have 2 speeds: off and I want to kill you. But in this civil rights business, such as it is, it's not really a business, right? We're not commerce, we're a cause. And when we talk about ourselves, the Nobel Peace Prize nominations or the other awards, it's not narcissism, it's necessity. So when I realized what had happened to Curtis, and then I talked to his older brother, who was a first classman, a senior, and he told me that some horrible things had happened to him as well. He'd blocked some of them out, and I just couldn't believe it. 30 years before that, when I was there, I had a very bad situation. I thought it was an anomaly. I was beaten twice in the space of a week, and my roommates and I had notes with swastikas on them aimed at me and everything else. They never found out who did it, and I ended up striking an officer, and I thought I was going to be court-martialed. But nothing ever happened to me or anything else, and I just kind of let it go. And then 30 years later, the wave came back again. And I often wonder at 2 in the morning, had I fought it then, of course I was 18, I didn't know what to do. I hadn't completed the academy, hadn't gone to law school. Had I fought in the interim 3 decades, maybe it wouldn't have come back and gotten my kids. The narrative in the Christian right is, well, Mikey Weinstein has got a chip on his shoulder because his kids couldn't handle a little bit of gentle proselytizing at the Air Force Academy. So he's on a if you listen to your enemies, I think Martin Luther King said it best, that in the end, Cenk, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. King's mantra, of course, was "We shall overcome," but I don't think that MLK would have been as effective, and he's a hero of mine, had there not also been a Malcolm X, whose mantra was, no, it's not "We shall overcome," we shall come over. And that is the way that we fight at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. And we have to be the way we are because our members of the military are suffering, and the quickest way to take somebody to the ground is to hit them as hard as you possibly can in the media or in court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if they said things like that to my kids, I'd want to fight back as hard as possible as well. And what drives, 2 things drive me crazy. One is whenever they say, oh, the Jews killed Jesus. Jesus was a Jew. How stupid are you? I know. How can you hate the Jews when Jesus was a Jew?
There was a study that came out last year. I think one of my kids sent it to me, that showed that the more you show clear incontrovertible evidence of someone in an argument. For instance, today is Saturday. And the person says, no, it's actually Wednesday. And you say, no, it's Saturday. Let me show you the calendars, the newspapers. We'll go to everything as you can possibly show. The more you show clear and convincing, incontrovertible, pristine evidence, it only further reinforces the person you're arguing with, their opinion against you. So I looked at this and I said, I'm not running for office. I don't care if you like us or not. The laws are on the books the way they are, but the bottom line is that when you have laws that are observed more in their breach than in their compliance, it's worse than if you never had the law before. I mean, I give you Jim Crow, right, and all of that stuff. And so you can argue Jesus was a Jew. You can argue, and we have problems with a lot of Jewish organizations. AIPAC, for instance, can't stand us. There's a tremendous,
why is that?
There's a huge axis of alliance between the fundamentalist Dominionist right and the extreme, Israel at all costs lobby. Now, there are plenty of Jewish organizations that are in support of what I personally support, a two-country solution in the Middle East. I don't wake up each day and get subliminal orders from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem just because I'm Jewish. But we have found that those I've been asked, well, how much do you support Netanyahu? Well, not very much, but why is that relevant? I mean, who cares whether I like chocolate, strawberry, or vanilla? This isn't going to be about me.
But ironically, actually, if anybody's getting telepathic orders from Israel, it's the Dominionists.
Yes, exactly. But their view is that Israel's perspective is that, hey, we'll take their support any way we can get it. It's almost as if you have fundamentalists saying, look, you Jews, you see that house over there? And we go, yeah. If you spend 2 nights there, we'll give you $10,000 per night. And the Jewish person says, are you serious? Yeah. I mean, just go spend 2 nights in that house. And you go, okay, well, I'll go do that. Really, that's 20 grand, 2 nights, right? Yeah. And what are you going to do? I'm going to pray that the house burns down while you're there. The whole concept is that
well, that's literally what they're doing.
Literally. We laugh, but it's gallows humor, and it's not funny from the perspective when you realize that this is happening. When I talk about these parachurch organizations, and their view is to utilize the militaries of the world to help further the cause of Christianity, that's all fine and good, except for the fact that it violates everything that we founded this country on. And unless you stand up to fight for it, it's not going to, no one's going to do anything.
So that was the second point that I was going to make. I mean, I would have thought that devout Christians, and of course we've made the distinction as to who is and is not in different camps, but would love Jews signing up for the military, Muslims signing up for the military, atheists signing up for the military. Hey, we're all one big country, and etc. But no, not so much.
No, and not. In fact, we represent a little bit in excess of 13% of all Muslim Americans in the U.S. military. We represent, I think it's now 861 LGB clients in the military. We just did a protest 9 months ago at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs on behalf of 22 lesbian, gay, and bisexual staff members and cadets at the academy. It's very, very different from the way you're seeing it. Their view is that, again, everything that happens has been preordained. We are so close to scoring that touchdown. Can we just get in the end zone? And those that oppose them, as I mentioned, that Bible study from the Officers Christian Fellowship, all opposition is, quote, spearheaded by Satan. What we're doing right now is spearheaded by Satan. They're going to see this interview. The enemies will see this, and you will see the blowback. I don't think it'll come to you. It'll come to us. It'll come to our staff and my family. My older son and his wife, she's a Christian. In fact, we're expecting our first grandchild in about 7 weeks, so we're excited about that. They're both Air Force Academy graduates. They saw this in the military that they were in. My son-in-law, my daughter's married to an Air Force pilot who's a very devout Christian. He's a pilot. I don't think they've seen much. She has seen it. She has, but he hasn't seen anything yet. He has a different last name, and not a lot of people are aware of the connection. We're not going to stop. This is one of those things, as Machiavelli said, when you aim at the prince, you better kill the prince. So there's no going back. We've burned the ships. We're going to fly this airplane into a mountaintop if we have to, but somebody has to fight it, and that's what I'm doing here on your show. This is where we have the gun smoke in my face as we're talking.
So I want to finish on that note. And by the way, I love also the irony of people think that Satan is talking to us or controlling us. I'm agnostic. I don't believe in any of the mythologies. So how could a guy I don't believe exists talk to me?
Right.
That's your mythology. It's not my mythology. Thor is not talking to me either.
Right.
Okay, but they're in crazy land. So what do you do with? So that goes to that question of what do you do with people in crazy land? How do you win this fight?
The best thing we can possibly do, I mean, the Romans had it right. When you cut off somebody's head and you stick it on a pole and you show it to the masses, it changes behavior. We don't cut off heads anymore, but we need people to be court-martialed. We need people to be punished. I'm sure you remember several decades ago we had the tailhook scandal in the Navy. Until then, the grabbings of asses, playing with boobs, and treating women as objects was considered sport and fun. It's still not great, but clearly the Navy came down and made it clear that, okay, this cannot happen anymore. Until we see somebody visibly punished, we have almost never seen anybody in the Pentagon significantly punished. In December, we saw a fantastic general discipline 6 people that had been torturing an army captain for 15 months who happens to be Jewish. 22 days after this captain came to us on a Saturday night, the 6 people in his chain of command, a number of them were fired, and others had their files papered with severe discipline, which was great to see. The new superintendent at the U.S. Military Academy, the former president of the Officers Christian Fellowship, he'd been our #1 enemy for a long time, came back from Iraq and saw the true nature of blood-curdling sectarian violence between the Kurds, Shia, and Sunni. And he is a devout evangelical Christian, which is fine with us. That's not a problem. But he made it clear. He said, look, we need help in understanding where those time, place, and manner lines are. He's fantastic. He's an American hero, and someone that would, for a long time, we had a videotape of him saying that he was the aroma of Jesus Christ in the Pentagon back when he was a 1-star. And but he got it. It's not infringing on any of his ability to practice his faith, which, that's something we would always fight. What you don't hear about is the evangelical Christian sergeant who came to us because he had an atheist commander about 6 months ago who put a bumper sticker on his car, the commander's car, that had the Christian fish and the word Satan in it. The sergeant, this was his commander, didn't know what to do. He went to the local chaplain and the local military lawyers, the JAGs, and they wouldn't help him. And they said, well, that's the commander's right. And the evangelical Christian sergeant said, I'm going to go to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. And they gasped audibly and said, well, they eat Christians like you for breakfast. It took us 10 days. But we went to that commander's commander coming down from the Pentagon. The commander was told, do not drive that car on base, or if you do, take the sticker off. And we won it for the evangelical Christian member of the military. And that's important. Is that the same thing as having fingers on the nukes, or trying to, whatever we can do to provoke a fight out of Iraq and Iran? Or when the IDF invaded into Gaza, they're looking for the signs everywhere. And Cenk, like I said before, it is an extraordinarily serious national security threat. And I know how it sounds, but we have the evidence to back it up.
All right. Well, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation was officially nominated again in 2013 for the Nobel Peace Prize. You're obviously a spirited fighter, and you're not going anywhere, that's for sure. No. And you're going to fight this to the end, and we appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it.
The honor and privilege, very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.